At this point, I'm almost running a full-blown transmission shop out of my garage, all because I'm so stubborn and I will not give up on this project, right? Everything is dying and crashing around me, but I am hell-bent on getting this truck back together.
The square body Chevy, the iconic, hard-working truck from the 70s and 80s. These trucks were built to endure the toughest jobs America had to throw at them. This is the show where we take these beasts that were once the heartbeat of America and bring new life into them to last for decades to come. My name is Jovani Dante Griego, and this is Square Repair.
All right, how is it going, everyone? Welcome back to another video. My name is Jovani Dante Griego. If you guys have been following the last couple of videos, we were heavily focused on our 1987 square body Suburban. And if you haven't noticed, those videos have been pretty sparse. The reason for that is because I ran into quite a few problems. Last I left off on that truck, the truck actually did run and drive. We'll go ahead and move it now in just a few and I'll show you guys. I was actually using that truck for a couple weeks to drive back and forth around town and whatnot. And two kind of major things happened with that truck. So the first kind of major thing that happened, and unfortunately a lot of this just either got lost or wasn't recorded, or I don't know where those files are. But as I was driving it one day, right after the swap, the engine just decided to start knocking. So this was a 5.3 that we built up, or maybe a 4.8, I don't remember. I think this was a 5.3 that we built back at the beginning of that particular series. It had just been something that had been sitting in my shop for a while. I didn't really remember any of the history on it. I tore it apart, it looked okay, slapped it back together and threw it in that truck. Now, I don't think any of the engine itself was to blame in that particular scenario. I think what happened is one of our injectors was actually leaking and basically washed out a cylinder, ended up taking out a rod bearing. So that's what happened with that. So that was not a really big deal. All the hard work basically had been done. So I ended up just pretty much that same day finding a used 4.8 that was in a running and driving truck, pulled it out with the guy, bought it for about $800, brought it back over here, threw it in there, and it's been okay ever since. Issue number two was one day as I was driving back home, I started getting a really bad, I don't even know how to describe it, almost like a locking up issue in, the transmission, or something in the driveline basically was like clunking. I immediately just pulled the car over. The car had a lot of resistance trying to move it. So much so that, in fact, when the tow truck driver went and picked it up, he could not pull it from the front. He had to pull it backwards because something was binding in that drivetrain. So my first assumption was the old SM465 that was in the truck that we mounted the LS to. I figured that thing was probably no good. I had no idea of the history of the transmission anyway. So I chalked that one up as a loss, basically, and figured, you know what, I was finally gonna pull the trigger. I had been kind of wanting to. I know it's a little bit blasphemous to want to convert a standard to an automatic, but I had a couple 4L80s here in the shop. I had actually found one just coincidentally on Facebook Marketplace for about $200. I figured, hey, if it works, it works. If it doesn't, it doesn't, right? It was a 4-wheel drive unit, picked it up. I mean, the thing was, it was okay. I mean, I had to clean it. It was pretty grungy. It actually kind of just looked like this one, to be honest. I picked that up, slapped it in. And that is about where this, what was supposed to be a couple month or maybe a month or two long project, has now spiraled into basically a lot of sadness, a lot of depression, and a lot of work. So we bought that $200 transmission. I threw it up in the truck, and the thing just didn't really do much. I tried to put it into drive, tried to put it in reverse. It really didn't do much of anything. So I chalked it up as, hey, it was $200 for a reason, right? And I took it upon myself. I said, hey, maybe this will be a learning opportunity for me. I've broken into a couple automatic transmissions in the past. I never really had much luck with automatic transmissions, but maybe this will be the one. So I went ahead and bought myself a kit basically to rebuild that transmission. All right, while we're here, let's see if we can get this thing moving under its own power, at least up to the driveway, so I can tell you guys what happens next. All right, let's see here. So as you can see, truck starts up just fine. Thing's actually really, really minty as far as that goes. Anyway, I chalked up that transmission as basically a loss, and I figured, you know what, it doesn't hurt me to spend a couple more $100 to get a rebuild kit and see what I can do. Maybe it's something simple. It seemed more than likely that the main issue was the reverse servo pin, and I figured that would be easy enough, and I learned a lot about 4L80Es, let's just say. I went ahead and rebuilt that transmission, slapped it back in the truck, hooked everything back up, and now it was kind of my chance to get it tuned, right? I've never really done a segment swap, which is called a segment swap, is when you're swapping from a car that had, you know, let's call it a manual, and converting it over to a 4L80E, for example. So there's a lot of, not a lot, but there's quite a bit of like wiring that has to happen and a lot of tuning knowledge. Proud to say that I learned a lot of that, and I think I got most of that dialed in. As you can see here, the truck starts up just fine. And actually, if I put it into drive, you'll see maybe we'll start moving. Maybe, like I said. Okay, so you can tell there was a really big thud, and we're still not moving. And now we're maybe starting to get out of here. No. So, oh no, it happened again. Okay, there we go. So anyway, sorry, I keep getting distracted. What turned out to be a simple automatic swap with the transmission rebuild turned into about, I don't know, 3 months of me fighting this thing. I've now gone through, let's see, I started off with the $200, we'll call it the Facebook Marketplace crapshoot. We went with that one, rebuilt it. What I thought to be was a good rebuild, thing ended up not working at all. So then I said, you know what, maybe this core is bad, maybe it's time to move on. Bought another junkyard 4L80E. It was 2-wheel drive. Took all the components out of that thing because it looked pretty good. Slapped them into my 4-wheel drive case while keeping the output shaft, slapping that all back together, putting that in the vehicle, and still absolutely nothing. The truck could not move. So took it out, changed the valve body on it because maybe I thought the valve body was bad because I did keep the old valve body to the new truck. The truck actually would drive, but basically what was happening was I would get to first gear. As it was making that first to second gear shift, basically the truck would just neutral out on me, and then it would either slam into second gear or just never go into second gear or never go back into gear in the first place. And so what would happen is I'd be driving, cruising just fine, stomp on the gas, first gear, lots of power, sounds fun, yeah, we're having fun here, and then neutral, and nothing. I would have to, you know, shake the gear around, see what happened, and then finally it would get down to like 20 miles an hour, and it would finally seem to grab, you know, second or third gear, and I'd be able to limp it from there. Now here's the thing, we're talking about electronically controlled transmissions. I'm not an expert on them. I'm not even close to being an expert on them, but what I was thinking, I'm like, this has to be a wiring issue, right? So I went through my entire harness all over again. I depinned everything, you know, I went through everything, traced everything, everything was perfect. So then I thought, okay, maybe it's the transmission harness itself, the internal harness. Swapped that out now. So this is about the 5th time I had to drop a pan on this thing. Swapped that out, still nothing. Truck just started being weird. I could take it, you know, 5 miles away from my house, but it would be troublesome coming back basically. So at that point, things were starting to get a little bit desperate here. I'm gonna see if I can move this truck now that it's warmed up a touch. All right, come on, baby. All right, as you can see, we're moving. Doesn't sound great, but we're moving. We might be in second gear, I'm not sure. And I'll explain to you guys what I think the issue is now. We'll go ahead and turn this thing off because I'll explain to you guys a little bit of what's going on in just a second here. All right, so back to the story here. Let's see, so now we've dropped the pan or taken the transmission out at least 4 or 5 times at this point, gone through my entire wiring harness. Really, I've done a lot more than I probably should have at this point, because it seems to be that you know, either the transmission, I just got really unlucky on the transmissions, or something else was going on that was just beyond my knowledge level. Like I said, I have very little experience with 4L80Es. I'm aware of them, I know them. I can tell you now, I know them inside and out. But at the time, you know, we've gone through basically dropping this transmission in and out a few times, and it's starting to get pretty frustrating. Pulling it out 4 times, dropping the pan on it every single time, it makes a mess. My driveway is just covered in transmission fluid, and it's just a lot of work. And so we've done this all several times at this point. Where does that leave us, basically? So what happens next is a series of things. A lot more taking the transmission out. I think I did go ahead and rebuild it again one more time. I did have a spare 4L80E just sitting around in the shop that was for a much newer version, like a 2003. The one I bought, mind you, was like a 1992 transmission, which they're a little bit different if you're not aware. I didn't want to put the other one in because first off, I didn't know what condition it was in. I think I got it from a junkyard like 5 years ago, and there was just a lot of variables, and I was trying to narrow down what the hell is going on with this truck. All the time this SM465 is sitting here, I'm thinking to myself, like, dang, maybe I should just get this thing rebuilt or just slap that thing back in or whatever. That would be my easiest solution, right? Because I knew it worked with it in there. Well, it was one of the several times I dropped the transmission down that I was pulling out the drive shaft, and I noticed that the rear end, there's that big pinion yoke nut on there. That thing was loose, like super loose. Like I can grab the rear gears and move them in and out. It kind of clicked in my head that the original issue might not have been the manual transmission at all. I believe the original issue was the fact that my pinion yoke nut came loose, and that's what would have locked up the driveline if those gears didn't mesh right. Now, I don't know if you want to call it stubbornness or determination or what, but at that point, you know, I probably concluded that my transmission was fine. The SM465 was probably fine. There's still a gaping hole in my floor pan. So in theory, I could have just swapped that SM465 back in, hooked everything back up, and probably called it a day at that point. Now, like I said, I don't know if it's stubbornness or determination, but I was already past the point of wanting to go back. Now, mind you, I've stopped filming at this point because I am just every day having nothing but frustration. And I know that that's not great content. I know you guys don't want to see me pull a transmission in and out of this truck 8 times. I kind of just put it off to the side, you know. It takes a long time to film these videos, and every minute that I'm adding to this is just another minute of torment, basically, for me. You know, the truck is just frustrating me at this point. Every time I take the transmission out, I do something, I feel like I'm nailing everything as far as the rebuild process goes. I put it back in and it just repeats the same problems over and over again. And there's a quote, you know, insanity is doing the same thing over and over and over again and expecting different results. And so at this point I'm thinking, like, it just has to be that I got unlucky with 2 different transmissions, or maybe I'm not good at building them. You know, maybe it's me. I'm more than happy to admit that I'm probably the problem here, you know. It's probably the fact that I can't build an automatic transmission to save my life. You know, as many YouTube videos as I looked at, as many guides that I read, as many manuals that I looked at, maybe I'm just doing something wrong. It's at this point where I decide the best way to do something, and this is advice for people if you're in this situation. Sometimes you need a known good variable, right? In my case, maybe I was disassembling things and not knowing the right order that they were being put back in. If you guys have ever taken apart an automatic transmission, there's not that many parts, but they all go in a very specific order. So what I did is I knew at least that the transmission that I had, that was the newer one that I was reluctant to put in here, I knew that that transmission most likely hadn't been torn into, right? It might not have been a good transmission, but I know the order that it was put together in was probably okay. Here I was taking apart 2 transmissions at the same time, lining every single part, tit for tat, you know, making sure I had the right bearings, the right bushings, the right everything, stacking them up on the floor, eyeballing everything. I've now acquired some really nice Mitutoyo dial calipers. Not only dial calipers, but I've bought dial indicators, measuring equipment. At this point, I'm almost running a full-blown transmission shop out of my garage, all because I'm so stubborn and I will not give up on this project, right? Mind you, this is a net negative for me at this point, My YouTube channel has not had a video posted in 3 months. You know, I basically cut the series short because I have no new content coming out on this square body. Everything is dying and crashing around me, but I am hell-bent on getting this truck back together. I just cannot let this thing go. I leave it sitting for a week and then I'm back under it the next day. You know, on the next Saturday, I'm underneath this truck pulling the transmission again. It took me 2 hours to take the transmission out the first time I did it, to I was down to, at one point, I think 30 minutes to take that transmission out. And that's including, you know, the time to drain it and everything. So I've become obsessed with this transmission at this point. And so here I am. I was like, this is it. I got it this time. This is going to work. I have these two identical transmissions on the floor. Every bearing, every bushing, every spacer is accounted for. Everything is torqued perfectly. I get my dial indicator and I'm, you know, lifting things up and I'm getting tolerances, and I have 0.08 tolerance here and 0.12 here, and I'm looking at the guide and everything is perfect. At this point, I'm like, okay, I've got this. You know, it took me a lot of mistakes, but I've dialed this in. I think I know how to do this now. So, big day comes. I've got my transmission. I've even painted this thing, which is rare for me. This thing looks like a brand new transmission. And I grab it, shove it in the truck, take it for a drive. The car starts up fine. We're driving and we're going first gear, waiting for that second gear. It's taking a while. Second gear never comes. Okay, maybe I was low on fluid. Go add a quart or two, I don't remember. Take it out again. Mind you, I'm just going up and down my road at this point because I don't trust this thing at all. And so we're driving first gear, and then neutral, and then second gear. Okay, maybe we just need to get the fluids running. Throw it in reverse, hold the brake, let the fluid pump. Throw it in drive, let the fluid pump. We go up and down the street a few times. It's still not shifting right. Maybe it's tuning. Maybe it's my speedometer output's not working right. I don't know. We'll tweak it. Spent a day or two tweaking it on the computer. Take it out again. Still the same results. I feel like I hadn't made any progress from now and since when I first had the original issue. And now I'm beat, right? And then to add insult to injury, it's sitting in my driveway. I decided, okay, maybe I made a couple tweaks. I'm going to put it in the drive again, and it will not move. It won't go forward. It won't go backwards. At this point, I'm lost because on a 4L80E, even if you have the whole electrical connector unplugged, the car should still have second gear and reverse. Those are manual inputs at that point, and it would not have any of them. I'm sitting there in my driveway just revving it up to 5,000, trying to drop it into gear, trying to do anything, just get something moving. And then I start smelling burnt clutches. And so at that point, I am a defeated man. You know, I've completely just, I don't know what to do at this point. So then I throw in the towel, basically. I say, you know what? It's either I go get this transmission rebuilt, or I buy a brand new transmission or a rebuilt transmission from somewhere. You know what I mean? And I don't know if you guys have ever looked, but a 4L80E is about $2,000 rebuilt. And as a matter of fact, rebuilding them is apparently very expensive too. Because I took that newer transmission that I had to a local transmission shop. They had it in their shop for a few weeks, maybe a month or two. And then they quoted me, once I had torn the whole thing apart, they quoted me, I think it was $2,200, which to me, I was like, you know what, I simply can't invest. First off, I can get a rebuilt transmission with the warranty shipped to my door for that price. Second, I don't want to throw that kind of money into this right now. I did learn one thing from that experience. I asked the guy, I said, hey man, look, I put that transmission back together myself. Like, do you have any pointers for me? You know, I paid him his diagnostic fee and all that. And he said, no, there was really nothing crazy that you missed. Like, everything was perfect. Your stack up was perfect. Your tolerances were perfect. Everything was perfect. It's just that if I'm going to warranty this thing, I've got to basically rebuild the entire thing. So I'm completely understanding of that. And at this point, I know that I'm doing something right? Like, if the transmission shop is saying I did everything perfect, what's the deal then? Why isn't this truck working? It's now been several months. It's been probably 5 months since the last time this truck drove with the manual transmission in here. And it occurred to me the other day, and this is kind of where the real kicker is. You know, I Google things a lot. It's really hard to describe the issues that I was coming with, and maybe some of you are keen enough to understand maybe where I'm going with this. But so I'm Googling, you know, transmission randomly goes into neutral, transmission not shifting, transmission neutrals, all these things, you know, whatever. And then the other thing is I hear a whining sound. I hear a whining sound when it's, I thought it was the pump at first, but this is a whole new transmission with a different pump and everything's been gone through and all this stuff. I hear a whining sound now. And I'm like, that doesn't make sense. Then I hop on old Facebook Marketplace again, like I haven't learned my lesson already. And I find a rebuilt 4L80E for $800. I instantly hop on that thing. I drive 100 miles away from home, go pick it up, drive 100 miles back, and I'm like, all right, here we go. This has been, the thing was rebuilt. I trust the seller 100%. It had been rebuilt. Transmission was just sitting. I could tell by my experience now with 4L80s, I can tell it had a rollerized output. It had, you know, it had been gone through. So I was like, I'm not going to tear into this thing. It's been rebuilt already. I'm going to put this thing in. I'm going to fill it up. And I'm going to make this truck work. Here we are. This is the transmission that's in this truck. This was a rebuilt unit. I know this thing's okay. I made damn sure I added a dipstick. I have 14, 15 cores in here. So much fluid in here that it was spewing out when I first started it. It was overfull, but that's fine. I just wanted to make sure that it had fluid in it. And here we are. You guys just saw that this truck doesn't move worth a damn. I can get it to move at least under its own power, but this truck just will not move. And it wasn't until about a week or two ago that I finally hit the right kind of search results, right? What if it was never the transmission in the first place, right? And you guys might know where I'm going with this. What if it was never the transmission? What's connected to the back of my transmission? A transfer case. This is a 4-wheel drive. So then I Google transfer case slipping. Transfer case going into neutral. Transfer case doing this. What do you know? NP208 transfer case. You know, here's a forum post from some guy 10 years ago saying, I have this weird issue where my transfer case just goes into neutral. My transfer case seems like it's slipping. My transfer case is making a whining noise. Oh my God. I immediately crawl underneath my truck. Pull off the fill cap from the NP208, stick my finger in there, take my finger out, and it's bone dry. All these times I've taken the transmission in and out of the vehicle, I don't think I ever even checked if it had fluid in it. You know, when you take it off the transmission, the fluid that's coming out of it, I assumed was just transmission fluid coming from the transmission. What if that was transmission fluid coming from the transfer case? Even if it was half a quart every time I took it off, I've taken the transmission down 10 times at this point. That's 5 quarts of fluid, you know? So now, that's where I am, I think. Now, I'm not gonna bet on anything. I'm not gonna even assume that this is my issue, because that's what got me into the scenario in the first place, is just assuming. There's a phrase I always use where it's assumptions are the mother of all fuck-ups. And I think that's what led me in this position here. From the very beginning, I assumed that the SM465 was broken when it was really probably my rear end. I assumed that my $200 piece of crap transmission from Facebook Marketplace was bad. I assumed that the first time I rebuilt it, I did it wrong. I assumed that the third time I rebuilt it, I did it wrong. I assumed all these things and never really, I diagnosed it, but I never diagnosed the right area, or I never brought in those other factors. Now, like I said, I don't know if the transfer case is the issue at this point. All signs kind of point to it, because like I said, this is a rebuilt unit. There's no way I've had bad luck this many times, right? The conclusion that I'm drawing, it was empty, or it was low on fluid. The whining noise seems to sound like the transfer case. There's a lot of clunking when I put it into gear, and that all kind of lines up with the transfer case. And that's all I can assume at this point, is that it's the transfer case. I don't even have 4-wheel drive hooked up, because I don't have a front drive shaft made for this yet, because I've never even gotten this thing 5 minutes away from my house yet with the new automatic transmission. I will say, like, I've been struggling with this, and I think it's time to move on with it, which is why, you know, the square body Suburban series will probably be put to an end soon, you know, whether good or bad. And I'll keep you guys up to date on what ends up being the solution, or if I ever find a solution. I don't know, but I learned a lot about 4L80s. I'll say that, you know, I'll never call myself an expert, but I can I can tear one of those bad boys apart and put it back together now in less than an hour. I learned a lot about LS swapping, learned a lot about segment swapping, learned a lot about tuning in general, and yeah, I learned a lot. And you know, sometimes it's mistakes like these that get us there. But yeah, so that's where we're at on this truck. You know, I know I haven't made videos, and it's because I've been stuck on this. I have plenty of things I want to show you guys, but I just feel so locked into this that I didn't want to post a random video that wasn't about this. But ultimately, the views on those videos, they kind of suck. This was all my own personal doing, you know, my own personal stubbornness or whatever. So what I'm saying to you guys is I'm gonna start making videos on other stuff now. If you guys want to see this, you know, let me know. I'm actually almost so fed up with this truck that whether I fix it or not, I'm probably gonna end up selling this. I love this truck. It's just that I don't have enough seat time in this for me to feel any kind of connection to it at this point. All I have is trauma from this vehicle at this point. So yeah, expect some more videos out. I got a lot of stuff going on. A lot of really cool stuff, new stuff, interesting stuff. I just want to hit it hard. Every year I want to hit it really hard for the whole year, and then it seems like I kind of fade away into the oblivion. But no, this year we're gonna do it. And once I get this thing out of my hair, whether it stays or not, we're going to just move on to the next thing. And I guess that's kind of the moral for this, right? Is that sometimes we need to just move on, and that's where I'm at. Anyway, guys, I'm Jovani Dante Griego. Thank you guys for watching this video. You know, if you want to see more stuff like this, subscribe to the channel, hit that like button so more people could see this video, and share it with your friends, share it with your car guys. You know, I think there's something to be learned here. I don't know what it is, but hopefully you guys find this useful, and I'll see you in the next one very soon.